Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am so blessed and honored that you would spend your time with me while you rest, while you work, while you walk, while you get something done in the home. Today, I have a big agenda. I've got several things I'm going to talk to you about. And first, I want to remind you to do your best, to look your best, to be your best, bathe and dress and groom your mind too. Get your mind settled. And one of the things I have found has helped me a lot is these stretch exercises when my mind is in a whirl and kind of cluttered up with things that need to be done. Two things that have helped me a lot is to settle down, get a serious cup of tea, and write a list. And the list doesn't have to be in order, just anything that comes to my mind as to what I wish would change or need to be done. And then, with a serious cup of tea, and then go for my Regency walk and walk in the on the lawn barefoot and pick herbs or something like that and do some stretch exercises that I use them, the ones online that I like. You know that I like the Fabulous 50s, but I don't always listen. I sometimes listen to something else while I follow the exercises, but I have memorized enough of the stretching that has benefited me a lot. In fact, I think I'm benefited more by stretch exercises because they're not as intense and rather than vigorous exercise, especially at my relevancy and vitality age. And so today I want to show you first a herb called oregano, and I have it growing outside, but you can grow it inside too. And it has many benefits. And one of the things that I learned about it, always when I pick up a herb, I will just show you what that looks like. Always when I pick up a herb, rub it between my fingers. I had a herb garden once years ago, and it was in a little circle. And when people came to visit, I said, just pick a leaf and rub it between your fingers and then smell. And it has an effect on your mood. And people have known this in times past, but I'm very happy to say that these are more prolific now. You can get them anywhere. And so I want you to look up on the web for your homework the benefits of oregano. I'll just tell you a couple of them. A friend of mine that's really into essential oils says that oregano oil, just a drop of it in her laundry, helps with the smell of mildew or mold. And but you need to look this up yourself. But it is antibacterial and it is good in food. And I have looked that up. I want you to look that up too. You can grow these easily at home, and the beauty of it is it's not like digging a carrot or potato or picking a pea. You can pinch off some of this and then you'll still have your plant. It'll be there a long time. Today also, I want to encourage you to have a healthy mind and a healthy body. And I think that you can do this by going back to the things that used to stabilize you. I like to do certain things that I've done since I was very, very young. And sometimes it's tempting to say, well, I won't bother with that anymore. I'm in a different stage of life. But then I'll go back to my reading, to my writing letters, to music, to art, and to literature, and to, some of my favorite authors that they're not well known, and might write a little story of myself too, and feel a little bit more stable. And we can't base our lives on what the world thinks is normal. But I think that you can have stability at home by having some kind of routine. That's why I suggest that you have a list. And although you might not go from 9:30 to 10, and it might not work out that way, at least you have a list you can go back to, and that will be very stabilizing. Always get up and bathe and dress and look your best before you get started, because that's going to have a big bearing on how your day goes with your work at home. Now, one of the problems that many young women have, and also men who have their jobs have changed and they are working from home, is how to regulate yourself. Because when you're in an institution, whether it's a school, a college, or a business, and you're in a building that's set aside for that, you're regulated by someone else. So you're institutionalized. And so when you get home, you have this strong desire to just go institutionalize yourself again, because you've got some kind of hierarchy monitoring you and telling you what to do next. And then you don't have to think, you just do it. And you're working for someone else. And so when you're home, you have to learn to regulate yourself. And that starts with your preparation for the day. And what I think is preparation is getting dressed and bathing and dressing and looking your best. And then mental preparation, your prayer life. Pray for your family. Pray for every member of your family. Because I doubt very much that many of us have got other people concerned enough about our families that they pray for our children and our grandchildren and our parents and all that. So you have to make sure you become the missionary of prayer in your own home. And then other things that stabilize you are orderliness, and that list is going to help a lot. And so I have been outside already today. I've walked around in the grass in my bare feet. I've picked a few herbs. I've done my stretch exercise, which I find more beneficial than the vigorous ones. Wish you were all little again. I would take you for a walk. And the other day on the way to worship services, which we just walk across the little path to the meeting house, and we were looking for mints to pop a mint in our mouth just in case we had to talk to somebody. We wanted to have nicer breath, even though we were all cleaned up and everything. But we couldn't find any. And some of the mints now that I used to like so much have got added ingredients like aspartame. So I haven't been buying them. But I said, well, let's just go outside, and on the way, let's just pick a leaf of mint. So we each picked a leaf of mint, and I said, just pop it in your mouth and chew it up. And that'll do for freshening your breath, just in case you have to talk to somebody. So I want to start out with these books that I have enjoyed so much reading to you, and I hope you'll find something to do, because there won't be anything here to look at. I think I've shown you everything. And one thing I noticed about the difference between doing a radio broadcast or videos and a book. On the videos, they are so severely monitored that you have to clarify things, like you have to always make sure you say, this is just my opinion, it's for your entertainment, you can take it or leave it, I'm not using it as advice. See your therapist first, see your doctor first, see your life manager first, see, what are they called? Life coach. See all these professionals first, But when I pick up one of these books that I like, and I read out of them, and some of them are quite up to date, like this one was, I believe, a 2020 publication. It doesn't have any of that in there. It doesn't say anything. And this is called Cottage Core. And it was all about things you could do with natural things outside that would benefit your home or your life. And it was great for people that were shut down the last couple of years. And I have really enjoyed it. And it was published by an English woman in England. And so some of the recipes I can't quite understand. But she didn't have to write, like she has this thing about, this page about making your own herbal teas. But she didn't have to write, please note, see your professional herbalist first. She just wrote it, and it's a book. And it doesn't say, there's no qualifications, no having to terrify yourself by saying, don't don't do any of this stuff without legal advice. So the books, they don't have to do that, but I've noticed on my blog that I have to be very careful what I say. For some reason, it's monitored more carefully than the books. No, but none of these books, some of them are brand new. I mean, like they were published recently. Don't have to say anything in here about that. And so I wanted to start out by reading from Cottage Core. which I think all of you could write a book like this. It's divided into the seasons: spring, summer, winter, fall, winter. And it just tells different projects and activities to enhance your life at home for that. And I want to read the part on drying herbs for year-round use. Now, this might not interest you, but can be very beautiful. I have seen people take them and wrap them in pretty ribbon, hang them upside down in their kitchen, and let them dry. And so this is part of the summer activities, and it's called Cottage Core Inspirations. I think all of you could write a book like this, and you could probably make it very nice. This is nice. It's okay. But I think that some of you could do an excellent job just writing your own cottage core book. And core means heart. A lot of people objected to this title, but core means heart. It's about heart, the heart. And so it says here, study herbs such as dill, bay, rosemary, and oregano. And they can be air-dried on a windowsill. Moisture-rich herbs such as basil, lemon balm, and mint are best oven-dried so that they dry out more quickly to avoid mold. That's interesting. See, I didn't know that. Before air-drying herbs, cut and remove any dry leaves. Shake gently to remove any insects or rinse with cool water and pat dry with paper towels. Wet herbs will mold and rot. Remove the lower leaves along the bottom inch or so of each branch. Bundle 4 to 6 branches together and tie as a bunch using string or a rubber band. And then leave these on a windowsill or in a sunny spot in the house. You can hang them up by making a makeshift washing line and using pegs to keep them in place. The bundles will shrink as they dry and the rubber band will loosen, so check periodically that the bundles are not slipping. I prefer to use a little clothes peg to hold them together. So then when they're dry, you put them in airtight containers and store them in a cool, dry place. And then she says here, make your own herbal teas. It will reduce your caffeine intake and your expenses. So she shows how to take an unbleached, use cotton that's unbleached, and it's called unbleached muslin, and sew together a little bag and fill it with your favorite herbs. And some of these herbs that I have shown you, you could just use them all. You can mix them. You can use them all at once, and they make a nice tea. You dip them in your hot water in your cup, and they don't have to be. It'll be very light color, but still the benefits will be just great. So she tells how to sew that together, and then when you're finished, you can wash out the bag and use it again. Now these things are a lot of trouble, but I'm reading it to you, and at least if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it, what I'm trying to tell you is you at least know about it. Your knowledge is very important. So get creative with herb mixes. You can buy dried herbs cheaply in bulk from health food stores. Use a teaspoon each of different herbs and spices, and let your taste buds and imagination run wild. Add in your fresh or dried herbs and spices. Fill the bag so that it's bulging. Your homemade tea bags can be stored until needed. The fresh herbs will keep their potency even when they have dried. Boil some water, pick out your favorite cup, drop in a bag, and pour over boiled water. Leave to infuse for a few minutes and then drink to enjoy. And then she tells you how to wash your tea bags. But, it's just important that you know about it if you ever have to do it. And that's why I recommend reading things like this. Or I don't actually sit down and read this. I just go to a page of the season that I'm in. Now this would suit any season. And as I often talk about our moods and how to overcome some of the unusual feelings you get in the home when you're not out in the bustling, noisy commercial area, I would like to read to you more about this weather book, because it has a big bearing on how you function at home. As a matter of fact, if you're into bread making, the weather has a lot to do with its success. So, remember I had talked about Eric Sloane's weather book, and here again, of course it was written in 1949, and there's no, even though this has been republished and reprinted, there's no qualifying statement, that says see your professional weather reporter or anything like that. So here we go. The signs of rain and why he wrote. He says, here is an old rhyme that is so crowded with weather lore involved from accurate observation that the reader can almost feel the rain gathering and getting ready to come down. Now, he did not write the poem, Eric Sloane, but he tells you what it means. And there was one line in here that says, last night the sun went pale to bed. He says this alluded to some of Christ's words about discerning the weather when he was talking to his disciples and to the Pharisees. The explanation of Christ's words. You'll say the weather is doing this and this, but you can't understand the heart or mankind or the times that we're living in. And this reminds me of a couple of things I hope to talk to you about later. So the last time I saw you, I was reading to you about old Betty's nerves. And I talked about how, if you'll go back and listen to that, it said here, a drop in air pressure affects the nerves instantly by causing greater dehydration of the tissues. Old wounds begin to ache. Corns and bunions are felt the minute the barometer drops. And it says that mental depression comes in pre-storm atmosphere. Isn't that interesting? Now, of course, in this allopathic world, everything is treated with a chemical. But once you start to understand, and chemicals can have terrible side effects and affect other parts of your body. And so what we want to do is get more natural and use our knowledge to solve some of these problems. And so I want to read the next part of the poem here. Loud quacks the duck, the peacock's cry. The distant hills are seeming nigh. So let's see what he says about this. The distant hills are seeming nigh is an oft-noticed weather sign of sailors. When the Connecticut shores appear unusually near to a Long Islander, rain is usually less than a day away. Marine air is always rich with salt haze from evaporation during good weather, but becomes clear with the mixing action of unstable atmosphere. That's interesting. When the instability of pre-storm air invades the coast, the clearing away of salt haze results in great visibility. Now that explains why. Of course, I'm not near I'm an hour away from the ocean, but I have hills in the distance. And they'll become very clear and very close. They seem very large. At other times, they'll seem far, far away. And that has something to do with this weather condition. Now, let me read you one more line here from his book called the Eric Sloane's Weather Book. And this is written in 1949. Low o'er the grass the swallow wings. Okay, so let's see what he says about that. Low o'er the grass the swallow wings is a weather sign that to my knowledge has never been researched. Yet we know that bats and swallows have extremely sensitive ears which they use as a sort of radar mechanism during flight to avoid hitting obstacles and to locate insects in the air. When pre-storm air pressure lowers abruptly, the pressure difference between the inside and outside of their heads becomes irritating, possibly painful. I imagine some of us will get that too. Therefore, bats and swallows will be seen seeking the relief of the highest air pressure, which of course is always found closest to earth. When you see swallows flying so close to the water that their wings occasionally touch the surface, you may usually predict a lowering barometer and a rainy spell ahead. Likewise, very high-flying bats and swallows would foretell fine weather. I always thought it was very Very sweet the way the swallows swoop down and up and they get closer to the ground. So I thought you might enjoy doing that, reading that. And today I'm going to read from my honorary adopted family member, Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet, because he covers something here from Jane Austen. And now, one of the reasons that we like Jane Austen, and I'm a veteran homeschool mother, and I lived back in the day before we had homeschool books or homeschool curriculum, and that was just gradually being developed after people got more interested in homeschooling. And so I used the Jane Austen novels as part of my homeschooling because, well, reading and spelling and writing and then how to read and how to view a story and how to summarize and how to understand people. There was a lot of people stuff going on in Jane Austen, which I thought my family needed because being homeschooled, we were more isolated, and so I really enjoyed that. And that's one reason why I spend the last 15 minutes talking about the people part. Because as homemakers, home dwellers, even if you're a man at home with your own business, there are people you're still going to have to deal with from out there or from extended family. And all the characters that you read about in Jane Austen, it hasn't changed. We all have people like that in our lives. So I wanted to read to you because this is similar to Eric Sloane's Weather book. His chapter on A Taste for Nature. And it says, I am very fond of standing by an open window. Well, back in the days when you could lift the window up, remember those wooden windows that you could lift up and stand in front of and then pull back down? I don't know if we can still do that, but it seems so romantic now that I think of it, the old farmhouse where you could lift up a window. Or sometimes the windows, you could roll them out. And so I'm very fond of standing by an open window. Simply opening a nearby window, and this is from Brian Kozlowski's the Jane Austen book, diet book, which isn't really a diet, it's just a lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. Simply opening a nearby window can do wonders in improving the indoor air quality. It's truly the healthiest air freshener at our disposal, according to researchers of the University of Leeds, who found that opening windows in hospital rooms dramatically reduces the risk of infection. Germs, fungal spores, carbon dioxide, and noxious fumes from electronic gadgets abound in buildings that are tightly shut in from the free air outside, which would compel Mr. Woodhouse to point out, I told you so. Rooms that are never properly aired are dangerous, he says in Emma, stale air being his prime concern for holding a ball at the long stagnant rooms of the Crown Inn. Yet all is soon put to rights and the health of Highbury restored. By what else? The promise that its windows would soon be open and the ballroom thoroughly aired. I hope you have had a pleasant airing. That's interesting. These phrases we pick up when we've been reading these novels of Jane Austen. Often I say they just need a good airing. When people are misbehaving, I say he just needs a good airing. Austenites love a good airing. Jane's term for joyriding in an open carriage, the Regency equivalent of driving in the car with the windows down. And seeing that we now spend more time in our modern carriages than ever before, it isn't off the health mark to say along with Mrs. Bennet, an airing would do me a great deal of good. Now that reminds me of this book that I had called Love Finds You in Charm, about the girl that went from her family generational farmhouse into town to live there, and the opening scene shows a girl with her hand out the window while she's driving a car. It looks like on the coast, I don't know, but if you haven't seen that film and you are vital. I would recommend it. Love finds you in charm. And so now I want to go on to wives and daughters. But first I'll just talk to you about a few things about the home. And you wonder, how do they get it all done? Some of these women that are home and they're homeschooling, how do you get it all done? How do you get all your homemaking done and all the things that need to be done when your children are there? And how fast these homeschool kids start doing very interesting things, like they start their own businesses, they grow their own gardens, they form their singing groups, and they all start playing the fiddle, and they develop ministries and things like that. How do they do it? Well, because it doesn't take long after they have learned some basic things to go out and use them, whereas their counterparts, their public school counterparts, are still sitting in the classroom with windows that don't go up and having to sit there for their 12-year sentence. These young people are almost immediately out practicing what they have learned or putting it to some kind of good use. And this is one reason that I homeschooled, and why I'm homeschooling you, because remember too, you can have the same problems in the house if you keep it all shut up all day and if you stay in it all day. But you can go outside on your deck or your wherever, what I call it, the deck. And you can go outside, or you can stand by an open window. And so this is one thing that I think will be very, very helpful. And so I want to read also now from first I'd like to tell you about being home, and as your children get older, and they don't have to be, like, they can be 6 years old and you realize you had something you wanted to do with them when they were 3 and you didn't because you were so busy. And I recently ran across was going through some, I've got an assignment to myself to go through one shelf or one drawer or one bookshelf every day, just one, because I'm the type of person that I was trained to start a job and finish it all in one day. Well, I can't do that. So, and it's so frustrating because I'll put off doing it at all because I can't do it all in one day. So I've made myself a list, and I'm trying to discipline myself to do one shelf, one drawer, one something every day. And so I did one pattern drawer just to straighten everything out, and found this old pattern. It's not an old pattern, it's actually quite new. I believe usually they have the dates on these things. This is 2012. Yeah, it is getting old. But it's a little cloth sewn playhouse that you stick over the backs of chairs or a table to play with. And we were just so busy when my daughter was little, and then my granddaughter, we just missed it twice. And I almost, my heart just sank when I got this out. Oh, we didn't do this. Oh, it's so sad, So I decided to quit looking back and feeling this drowning sadness, this drowning sorrow and grief over things I didn't get done. And I thought, well, you know what? I like that little playhouse. I think I'm just going to make it just for fun, just to have it. So I might do that. I wanted to see what it was like to do that. I wanted to try it. So that I've got it out here, and I'm going to try to set it out where I can see it, so that to remind me, hopefully. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I often see things that I bought when patterns were 99 cents. I'd buy a costume, or I'd buy something that was very interesting. Never, either didn't get the time to do it, or the expense of it was just, I couldn't figure out how to do it with the expense. So now that I've got the time, I'm going to try to do some of those things instead of looking back and feeling sad. Well, it's the same with books. As I go through the bookshelf, I'll see a book that, we didn't get a chance to really go through it or discuss it. And then I'll call one of my grown children and I'll say, you got a minute? Just listen to this. And I'll tell them what book it came from, and that, I just wanted them to know it. And I always inform them that I'm not finished with them yet. I'm not finished with the books. I'm not finished with the kids yet. So I'm going to read now from Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I believe she might have been later than Jane Austen, although I can't tell you, it doesn't say exactly what the dates were for Gaskell in this book. I wish it had given the date. I think it was 1864 or something like that. So she was a little later than Jane Austen, although she uses some of the same references. Now, both of these, Jane Austen and Elizabeth Gaskell, just wrote to their own society, so they didn't have to explain a lot of things. They were writing to people that would have known what they were talking about when they said the dressing table, or when they said the wash basin, or something like that, or the leg of mutton. They would have known what that was. Whereas today, I think you'd have to stop and explain it to some people, or they'll have to look it up. Now, not me, because I'm an antiquity already. I already know these things. So, and I grew up on a homestead in Alaska where we started out very, very primitively, and improved everything until we were living more modernly. So now I'm going to read this page. And yesterday, remember, or the day before, remember, she said, I think we came to the part where Mrs. Hamley had received Molly and was so glad to see her, and her father had relented and let her come because Mr. Cox had shown a fancy to Molly, and all of a sudden it seemed like a much better idea that Mr. Gibson had been resisting letting her go and spend time with Mrs. Hamley, who needed a companion, who had been sick and kept asking after her to come. And Mr. Gibson didn't want her to come for several reasons, and then he decided that might be a good idea after all, since Mr. Cox had shown such an interest, and he was one of the employees in his pharmacy department. And so I wanted to read you some of that about the last time I saw you when I was reading it. She said, Mrs. Hamley said, "And now I will take you to your room. I have had you put close to me, and I thought you would like it better, even though it was a smaller room than the other." She rose languidly, and wrapping her light shawl around her yet elegant figure, led the way upstairs. Molly's bedroom opened out into Mrs. Hamley's sitting room, on the other side of which was her own bedroom. She showed Molly this easy means of communication, and then, telling her visitor she would await her in the sitting room, she closed the door, and Molly was left at leisure to make acquaintance with her surroundings. First of all, she went to the window to see what was to be seen. A flower garden right below, a meadow of ripe grass just beyond, changing color in long sweeps as the soft wind blew over it, great old forest trees, a little on one side and beyond them again, to be seen only by standing very close to the side of the window-sill, or by putting her head out, if the window was open, the silver shimmer of a mare about a quarter of a mile off. If you'll notice, those of you who have gotten the DVDs of the series Wives and Daughters, you notice what a great job they did with the scenery. Sometimes I just watch it just to see the backgrounds. They did a wonderful job with the scenery, and these descriptions match, the little meadows and the hedges and the wooded areas. They match these descriptions, so they did a wonderful job. On the opposite side to the trees, the lookout was bounded by the old walls and high-peaked roofs of the extensive farm buildings. Yes, and I did like the old buildings that they showed in the film, the old farm buildings and other old buildings of the town that they lived in. So, on the opposite side to the trees, the deliciousness of the early summer silence was only the deliciousness of the early summer silence. That's so sweet. Was only broken by the song of the birds and the nearer hum of the bees. Listening to these sounds, which enhanced the exquisite sense of stillness, and puzzling out objects obscured by distance or shadow, Molly forgot herself and was suddenly startled into a sense of the present by a sound of voices in the next room, some servants or other speaking to Mrs. Hamley. You know, they did a good job, too, of showing Molly thinking about something or looking at something and then being startled into the present. They did a very good job of that in the movie. Now, I will say that if you have young children around, there's only about one or two scenes that you have to be careful with because they were in their dressing room in their long sleeping gowns or something. And I think that people, if you're homeschooled, you always like to be careful what your children see. So I would say this is good for people our age or young adult ladies that like to watch period movies. Is pretty good. The costumes especially are very nice. And the fabrics, I love the fabrics of the movie. Molly hurried to unpack her box and arrange her few clothes in the pretty old-fashioned chest of drawers, which was to serve her as dressing table as well. On all the furniture in the room was as old-fashioned and as well preserved as it could be. Yes, people in the olden days also had old-fashioned stuff from previous generations. The chintz curtains were Indian calico of the last century. The colors were almost washed out, but the stuff itself exquisitely clean. I was watching the first episode of Wives and Daughters and looked at the furniture and thought how much like it was the stuff I see in the antique stores today. And we have reproductions very much like what was in Wives and Daughters. There was a little strip of bedside carpeting, but the wooden flooring thus liberally displayed was of finely grained oak, so firmly joined, plank to plank, that no grain of dust could make its way into the interstices. There were none of the luxuries of modern days, no writing table, or sofa, or pier glass. In one corner of the walls was a bracket holding an Indian jar filled with potpourri, and the climbing honeysuckle outside the open window scented the room more exquisitely than any perfume. Molly laid out her white gown of last year's date and size upon the bed, ready for the new to her operation of dressing for dinner, and having arranged her hair and dress, and taken out her company worsted work, she opened the door softly and saw Mrs. Hamley lying on the sofa. "Shall we stay up here, my dear? I think it's pleasanter than down below, and then I shall not have to come upstairs again at dressing time." "I shall like it very much," replied Molly. "Ah, you've got your sewing. That's like a good girl," said Mrs. Hamley. "Now, I don't sew much. I live alone a great deal. You see, both my boys are at Cambridge, and the squire is out of doors all day long, so I have almost forgotten how to sew. I do read a great deal. Do you like reading?" "It depends upon the kind of book," said Molly. "I'm afraid I don't like steady reading, as Papa calls it." "But you like poetry," said Mrs. Hamley, almost interrupting Molly. "I was sure you did from your face. Have you read the last poem of Mr. Hemans? Shall I read it aloud to you?" She began. Molly was not so much absorbed in listening, but that she should glance around the room. The character of the furniture was much the same as her own at home, old-fashioned, of handsome material, and faultlessly clean. The age and the foreign appearance of it gave an aspect of comfort and picturesqueness to the whole apartment. On the walls there hung some crayon sketches, portraits. I love crayons, and I don't color in coloring books, but I love to do the artwork with crayons. They're so handy. You don't have to clean up your mess afterwards. You don't have to wash the brushes, and you don't have to let anything dry. I just love them, and I learned when my children were in homeschool, they had a little art book. I don't know what it was or where it is now, but that taught them how to use crayons to create art. And what it would do is they would use a crayon to outline something, and take a soft eraser and pull the color in towards the center of the outline, and made beautiful pictures with it. And these days you can get professional crayons and huge collection of every color and every hue and shade. And so I really do like them. When the reading of the poem was ended, Mrs. Hamley replied to some of Molly's words of admiration by saying, "Ah, I think I must read you some of Osborne's poetry some day, under seal of secrecy, remember, but I really fancy they are almost as good as Mr. Hemans. To be nearly as good was saying as much to the young ladies of the day, was saying the poetry was nearly as good as Tennyson's." "Mr. Osborne Hamley, does your son write poetry?" "Yes, I really think I may say he is a poet. He is a very brilliant, clever young man, and he quite hopes to get a fellowship at Trinity. He says he's sure to be high up among the Wranglers, and that he expects to be get one of the Chancellor's medals. That is his likeness there, the one hanging against the wall behind you." Molly turned around and saw one of the crayon sketches representing two boys in the most youthful kind of jackets and trousers, falling collars. The elder was sitting down, reading intently. The younger was standing by him and evidently trying to call the attention of the reader off to some object out of doors, out of the window of the very room in which they were sitting, as Molly discovered when she began to recognize the articles of furniture faintly indicated in the picture. "I like their faces," said Molly. "I suppose it is so long ago now that I may speak of their likenesses to you as if they were somebody else." And you remember, Osborne was the literary, intellectual type, and wrote poetry, and very studious. And Roger, I believe he may have been the younger brother, was the outdoorsy type. He liked to watch birds and watch fish and watch insects, and so made him an interesting character. But he was a very kind person, and was both of them had such high qualities in this book. And I really appreciated the way that this woman wrote, because even the characters that ran interference in Molly's life, eventually you didn't think so badly of them, and because some of them changed their ways or found success and in their personalities. So now it's coming on that point where I want to read to you or talk to you about the people part, because you will be managing people and personalities, maybe not so much in your home as other people. Many homemakers do strive to be more withdrawn and in the home so they can get their things done without dealing with too many social problems and social things. And I have heard yesterday from an old friend. I mean, we've been friends for 50 years. And she told me that she had to quit some volunteer work she was doing, and it was actually had to do with sewing. It was sewing for this certain cause, And she said she had done it for several years and then realized that it had taken up so much of her time and health, and also that more and more demands were put on her for it. So now she limits her sewing and quilting and volunteer work to the loved ones in her home, her family, because now she has extended family. And that is a good thing to do. I've often looked back and noticed some of the expense I went to or time I went to for people that, if I analyzed it, could have had help from their own families. And so what we need to do is make sure that your volunteer work is for your own. It is really volunteer work. That means you volunteer to make your daughter a skirt. You volunteer to make your son a quilt. You volunteer to go and help one of the members of your family. Because sometimes volunteer work comes to a point where it's not volunteer anymore, it's obligation. So it's no fun, is it, when you feel pressured and pushed to do something? So I wanted to bring that up to you, because it's easy to get into that, because people think that homemakers don't have anything to do. and that they not, that's one thing they think, but the other thing they think is that they have to, because they're not out, quote, in the labor field, not out working in a commercial sense, that they therefore are obligated to do something for free for someone. But this is not true. Now, I want to talk to you about educated people. This is why I talk about homeschooling quite a bit, is because something I noticed in the late 1950s was the complaining that a lot of the parents would do when their children came back from college. This is when people started going more people went to college. It used to be like in the days of Wives and Daughters, you'd get a fellowship at a certain place, and you either became some kind of professional. It wasn't for everybody, but now college has started to be for everybody, and people would come back from college and smart in all kinds of everything, just extremely smart. But the mothers would complain that they had come home unable to pick up their own socks or unable to fix a meal for themselves, and that their relationships were a disaster, and they'd go through relationships unable to keep anything together, not able to keep their lives together, not able to create their own jobs or keep a job, but they were very smart and had all kinds of education. And this is one of the things that I was trying to confront when I decided to homeschool. So you get a lot of, and this brings me to what I'm talking about here. You get a lot of people who have the education in something that they think they are pretty smart. And so you're a homemaker, you're at home, or you're homeschooling, and they want to run your life or give you ideas, or else tell you that you're crazy. And so I found an answer to that. I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said that what she did when someone told her she was crazy, because she was a woman that wanted to do things by hand or sew her own things, and people thought she was crazy because she wasn't taking advantage of all the conveniences in life. And she was growing her own garden, and she was homeschooling her children, and she had an old acquaintance that would tell her that she was crazy. And she said she got tired of it. And one day she said to this person, you might be right. And there again you have that phrase, you might be right. It's a neutral saying. It's like saying the word interesting. Interesting. That's a neutral. So if you say you might be right, you may be right. You're not saying someone's right. You're just saying you might be right, and you're just giving it kind of a little neutral statement. She would say, I had her write, I said, just a minute, let me write that down. She said, in case I really do need help, would you please write a letter of recommendation to a professional that could help me, and would you pay for the appointment? And write down what you think what your analysis is, and what you think is wrong. And please give some references or proof, that this is normal or abnormal. And what are you using, what peer-reviewed report or book are you using to indicate that I have these problems. And if you think I'm a danger to society, would you please write a letter to me indicating what all those things that are wrong, and would you help me somehow find the right way? These people never do. She says no. She says that was the last that she heard from them. You got to be careful with that too, because they might just think you mean it and bring the paddy wagon and load you up. But we will always have these people around. And remember, in the book of the novel written by Jane Austen called Emma, what she was trying to do was make this character unlikable. Unfortunately, many people really liked her. After we read it or watched the current movie on her, we liked her. But she was somebody that wanted to help people grow or improve their lives. And what it amounts to is a modern day equivalent of the Messiah complex, they call it. We're all going to go out and we're going to help people improve, and we're going to save them and everything. And there'll be people like that will want to make you one of their ministry projects because they think that you can do better and have an ideal for it. If you have not been through anything like that, that's good, because it can really, if you're very young and someone's treating you like that, like you're just not all there, they can make you, if you're innocent of it and you don't really understand people that do that, and it's never happened, it can be quite shocking to you. It can be quite an irritant. And so what you have to do is ask what their qualifications are and ask what their problems, can they manage their lives? What about their relationships? What about the stability of their own families and their own home, or the people that they have had responsibility for? Ask them all about that. Ask them how this person is managing their money. Ask them how they're managing their time, and just get make sure that they're qualified to tell you those things. And that's an interesting adventure, to find out all about how this person has managed their life, and ask them all kinds of questions, because if you have a stable home life and your home and your family is not in distress, any kind of distress I'm talking about from you personally, you don't need to listen to people telling you just how crazy you are. Most of us can probably tell ourselves that ourselves. And so, ladies, I think that if you have any special, unique personality type people that you have dealt with in the past, you have to actually, you don't have to be really elderly to experience it, because some people from the time they have been very young have noticed there's always a critic, there's always a complainer, and there's always a pushy, domineering type person. These are the kind of things that go into people's stories and novels, and that's why I always say, if people get a little too pushy, I say, you're coming dangerously close to becoming a character in my novel. So, ladies, I hope that you have a lovely time today. Remember, these are just my opinions. Take them or leave them. Just use it for your amusement. And I really hope that you get a lot done, and that you grow in stability, mental stability, and bodily health. And so be sure and do your homework, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.